Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's Budget Subcommittee Department hearings. I just wanted to, before we begin this morning's sessions, which will include department hearings on the Civil Rights, Youth Coordinating Board, and Municipal Building Commission, I also just wanted to alert folks of some schedule changes for the afternoon. We were just contacted by the Superintendent Miller's office at the Park Board, and she is ill today. So we're going to be able to accommodate her request for a change. And then also, sad to report that Melvin Tennant, who's our CEO of Minneapolis, his father passed away yesterday. So he is also going to be unavailable. So we've decided to shift the Park Board and then the Convention Center, Target Center, Minneapolis department hearings until the overtime period, which is on, I think it's November 16th, but we'll do that. That's precisely why we have that overtime time slotted and available for these kind of schedule changes and for additional questions from council members on other departments. So that'll give us a little opportunity to review those materials, which are available online. And the Park Board budget has been presented to the Park Board, the Park and Recreation Board. So I don't think that's going to be any surprise information, but it'll allow us all an opportunity to have those materials available for further review before we actually have the department hearings. With that, it also created a little opportunity, so we'll just be able to move the capital and debt budget. Mr. Ablin will be able to move that up into the end of this morning's session. So if it's convenient for everyone on the council and staff, we'll be able to begin with civil rights. We'll go to Youth Coordinating Board, Municipal Building Commission, and then we'll go right into capital and debt budget. And then instead of having a lunch break, we'll conclude the day at that point. So hope that doesn't affect yours, Ms. Corbel's agenda, because you were up anyway, up first, so it doesn't change yours. But I wanted to alert everybody of that, and we'll be making appropriate messages to let people know. So with that, welcome. Velma Corbel, begin whenever you're ready.
Mr. Chair and committee members, my name is Velma Corbel. I'm the director of the Minneapolis Department of Civil Rights, and I'm here this morning to present the mayor's recommended budget for the department. And you can find the mayor's recommended budget in the budget book on pages F107 and F114. First slide up is just a picture of the organization inside the Civil Rights Department. You will note there that there are 5 divisions, 3 public-facing commissions that are staffed by the department, and 1 review panel, police misconduct complaint review panel, that is a collaboration of sworn and civilian staff, and that civilian staff or civilian representatives are appointed by the mayor and city council. There is an overall full-time equivalency complement of 29 staff in the department, and you'll note as I go through the presentation that there is proposed a net increase of 1 staff to the department, bringing it to a total of 30. This is the summary page of the proposed budget. I would note that the final line of the 2018 recommended budget is approximately $4.4 million, but I would call the attention of the Budget Committee to the fact that $450,000 of that is capital monies to be spent only for a compliance management system in the contract compliance division. $15,000 of that is also capital resources to be spent only for complaint filing enhancements in the Office of Police Conduct Review. And then $837,000 of that money is also internal service charges. So that really leaves about $3.2 million of general fund, proposed general fund resources for program dollars in the Civil Rights Department. We'll go through the slides for the core programs in the Civil Rights Department. The first is a Complaint Investigations Division. I won't read the entire slide, but I will highlight that the main program elements in the Complaint Investigations Division. It is a traditional civil rights entity where they take in complaints of discrimination based on areas of coverage and protections in the Minneapolis Civil Rights Ordinance. They also handle some hate crimes work, new this year in response to all that's going on in our world and in our community. And I will tell you that since that we opened up a complaint hate crimes hotline, and since June, we received 54 complaints on that line that are actually actionable by an entity either in the city or one of our partners that we're collaborating with. And so that is telling for the times we're living in. That division also provides administrative support to the Commission on Civil Rights. And we'll talk a little bit more detail about that division as we go through the presentation. You will see on this slide on the change items in the Complaint Investigations Division that are proposed for 2018. There's a reduction proposed of $98,300, which is a transfer of a position and the accompanying dollars to Neighborhood and Community Relations to create the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs. And I will just say this to the Budget Committee, that this department and myself personally are very supportive of the creation of this office and really have no real feeling about where that office is housed. The issue for me is that it will be almost impossible for the department to continue its current level of service in 2018 and absolutely impossible if this is an ongoing reduction to this division. I was speaking with the division director in that division in the last couple of days, and in addition to an increase in work as a result of what is going on in the world, there's also an increase in housing complaints that are coming into this department. 14% of the cases handled in 2016 through 17 were housing-related complaints, as opposed to about 4% in previous years. So this trend is telling us something. It's also telling us that there is likely going to be an increase in this work, and I know this has been a focus for many of the members on the City Council. It is also a focus for the department. So I'm concerned about that reduction.
Thank you for that. I just would like to, first of all, acknowledge I've been joined on the committee this morning with Councilmember Palmisano, Councilmember Goodman, Councilmember Johnson, and Council Vice President Glidden, who had a question or comment on this last slide.
Thanks, and I know you'll kind of get into more on this. I'm just, so I'm curious if you have done anything yet to try to quantify what might be the impact on the department. And the only reason I just say that is I didn't know if there was some sort of an analysis of kind of how the work was shared already, and then what would be the impact on the remaining staff, you know, for those who, well, let me just say for council members who have been here for the last 4 years, I mean, you haven't been here through years when trying to find out how the department was able to have the capacity to properly, you know, process civil rights complaints was a really big deal. And so, so anyway, this position is, I appreciate you kind of flagging that for us. It's curious too that the housing complaints are increasing, and then of course we have an additional element added to the Civil Rights Ordinance, which is the Section 8 piece, which will start being implemented mid-year next year. So that'll be another thing. So, so anyway, I don't know if you've done anything to start to try to kind of quantify what that might be, but I understand it's important.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Council Vice President. We have started to look at that work, not just because we knew we were coming to talk about the budget presentation today, but looking at how we can plan the work for 2018 and beyond in general. And I can tell you that we have been very intentional about leveraging all the elements of the Civil Rights Ordinance. In past years, we've really kind of focused on the employment area in this law. But we realize that in order for us to be an effective department and to live out the values that the City Council set for us, we need to leverage all of the protections in that Civil Rights Ordinance. It will be impossible to do, as I said, the continuing level of service, and certainly would be impossible to look at how we fully leverage that law for all of the people in this community with this reduction. We've worked hard over the last several years to get ourselves in a position so that our folks are trained, our processes are tight and efficient, the technology is supporting the work, and I would just hate to see us go backwards. And I know this reduction was well intended, and I have to believe that there might have been some slight miscommunication about how we were going to move forward with this. But I have talked to the Director of Neighborhood Community Relations, David Rubador, and we both understand that this is something that certainly the mayor wants to do. We know that there are council members on the council that want to do this as well. And so we'll work together to get it done. We just have to figure out the best way as a city to do it. I just am concerned that this way to resource the office is just really going to really hinder us in a significant way in our department. These next few slides are just some illustrations of how data is tracked and collected inside the Complaint Investigations Division. Unfortunately, because we were cutting and pasting data over from the original presentation for the mayor, this data is somewhat old, and so work is ongoing and continuing in this department. I think this is actually the end of 2016. We're already 10 months into 2017, so this data will look differently, but I think it's a good depiction for people who are looking at this presentation to see the kinds of things that we're tracking, and there are good one-to-one comparisons there. Same thing here, 2016 data, but it'll show you that we're tracking ADR, which is Alternative Dispute Resolution, is a really good tool in our complaint handling process because it creates an opportunity for us to deliver these win-win situations for employees who are currently working or folks in properties where they want a good outcome with their landlord. This gives us a really good opportunity to handle those kinds of complaints. In the Contract Compliance Division, this proposal for the Contract Compliance Division is relatively flat in 2018, with the exception, as I mentioned, of the $450,000 capital injection that we'll see here on a later slide. But the Contract Compliance Division is really the department that ensures that where public money is spent on building opportunities in this city, that women and minorities have a fair opportunity to be included in that work, either as businesses or as workers. And there's a data slide in here about contract compliance that we'll get to a little later, but one of the things that is really telling as to how much is going on in the city and how important this division is to the city. In 2017 second quarter, the Contract Compliance Division is monitoring inclusion on about $80 million worth of city contracts. That's just at the end of the second quarter. We made that report to the Public Safety Committee a few weeks ago. But if you compare the second quarter to the whole year of 2015, we monitored $83 million worth of projects. So we've got 4 quarters worth of work in 2015 of $83 million, 2 quarters worth of work, $80 million, and that just continues to grow. So every time we celebrate all the building permits and all the municipal contracts happening in the region, that has a corresponding effect on the amount of work that is being done in the Contract Compliance Division. You know, thank you to the City Council for recognizing this over the years and have really resourced this division. But I can see if this trend continues going forward, just putting this on folks' radar, we will probably come back and request resources to be able to continue to deliver the level of service that we are have been delivering in contract compliance. But that work is growing significantly. This is just a slide, numerical slide of the budget. The number, their current funding on the general fund, that number also includes $837 million worth of internal service charges. That is rent, that is insurance, that is IT, and this is how the finance department just pushes that number through the department's budget. So I don't want that to confuse people that we've got almost, $2 million. We don't. So anyway, moving on, again, data for the contract compliance division. This is again pretty old data, but there's the department's website does include the most recent information on performance for all of the divisions inside the Civil Rights Department. Again, a good picture of how we collect and report out on data, but there is 2017 data up and live on our department website.
Ms. Corbel, on that point, on the 2017 data that's available, how is it tracking?
It is trending much greater than you would see here on this current table.
Would it be ahead of, for example, the 2015 levels?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
It will be.
Just wanted to
It will be.
give
Thank
it
you
some
for the question.
context.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. In the Office of Police Conduct Review, that office, as you know, is responsible for taking in and investigating complaints of police misconduct allegations. There has been quite a bit of focus on this division in the recent past for good reason. They are solid. They are supporting a police conduct oversight commission that is also solid. So they've been doing a great deal of work, not just with the complaint load, but also in looking at police policy and procedure and making recommendations back to the city council. We'll talk here in the next couple of slides about a change item in the Office of Police Conduct Review that I think is, that is well reasoned and probably overdue, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. This division is doing all of the work that you see from it with currently 6 people, and there is a proposal to increase the FTEs in this division by 1 person. This is the depiction of what the department looks like now in the resources, inclusive of a $98,300 FTE for really looking at the work that is coming about as a result of the body camera implementation. If you talk to the police department, they talk about new work in the police department as a result of having to review all of the information and data from the body camera use. There's a corresponding increase when it comes to looking at that camera footage in the complaint investigation side of things. So the position in the Office of Police Conduct Review for $96,800 is an increase of an FTE to do that work. The other thing that I would point out about the Office of Police Conduct Review as well, if for those who were here back in 2011-12 time frame, there's a provision in the procedures that gives a complainant the opportunity to select a civilian investigator or a sworn investigator. And the sworn investigators, of course, are in the Internal Affairs Division in the Police Department. And most of that work, the intake work, all of the intake work is coming through the civilian investigator. So in addition to increase in work related to the body cameras, there's also just in how we are proceduralizing investigations between Internal Affairs and the Office of Police Conduct Review, an increase in work. And so, so I'm grateful that this was recognized and this additional position was proposed for 2018. Data on the next couple of slides from the Office of Police Conduct Review. I would point out that the Office of Police Conduct Review now has its data on a Tableau website. It's interactive, it's dynamic. The data that you will see here is a depiction of how some of that data is tracked and reported, but to get a real live look at what is happening with police misconduct complaints in the city of Minneapolis, I would invite people to go to the Civil Rights Department's website and click in on the report section under the Office of Police Conduct Review for the most up-to-date real-time information. In the Civil Rights Equity Division, proposal for this division is relatively flat this year, but I will note that the Civil Rights Equity Division is not only the division responsible for the Urban Scholars Program, but they're also our main conduit to the city's overall equity and racial equity work, and they have also really been invaluable in assisting the Civil Rights Department in making sure that its work is equitable and delivering equitable outcomes. But I'll talk to you about the Urban Scholars Program. It was the best that the city has seen in the 8 years of this program, about 8 years now. But what we really like to see from the Urban Scholars Program is for the young people who are interns here in the summer to get ongoing work in the city and in our other partners. And there's some data here that we'll talk about some of that when we get to the data slides. But every time I talk about the Urban Scholars, I make an appeal to people, not just bring these young people in for a summer, but these are folk that are looking for full-time jobs, and there are some in the city, but they're also a good way to diversify our workforce. And I know that the Human Resources Department, maybe, I don't know if they've come yet, but I know that is an objective for them. But I know this is a program that can certainly help do that. This group is doing all of its work with 3 FTEs, and that remains flat for 2018. Data on Urban Scholars, and then the Labor Standards Enforcement Division. I want to spend a little bit.
So if you want to pause for
Yes,
just a
yes.
moment, I just wanted to kind of acknowledge Councilmember Goodman was actually one who initiated staff direction to Human Resources to develop some mechanism for us to have more formality around hoping that is the case, right? And so we haven't yet had the presentation back to us on that, but that was the direction to Human Resources with the focus on Urban Scholars, but also looking at some of the other internship programs within the city. So I wanted to thank you for mentioning that because it's very important.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Councilmember Goodman. I did remember that, so thank you for reminding me. Thank you very much. That's a big deal. In the Labor Standards Enforcement Division, this is a new division as of about midway through the year last year. And this is a division created inside the Civil Rights Department to implement and enforce the Sick and Save Time Ordinance that took effect on July 1st of this year, and also the Minimum Wage Ordinance, which will be effective for large employers on January 1st. This division has been doing the implementation work with 2 staff people that were actually transferred from the coordinator's office about midway through 2017. That was just for the Sick and Save Time implementation and enforcement. We have now the Minimum Wage Ordinance, which will kick into high gear next year. But there has been a run-up work related to getting ready to implement minimum wage. So the communications, the outreach and engagement, the development of frequently asked questions, the drafting of rules, all of that has been essential to making sure that both the Sick and Save Time Ordinance and the Minimum Wage Ordinance are implemented fully, and so that successful implementation of both of these labor laws will make sure that the people that this was intended to help will be helped. So I say all of that to say that there is this is the current picture of the Labor Standards Enforcement Division. The $330,000 requested in the general fund is inclusive of the 2 positions and approximately $60,000 change item this year for ongoing resources to either do one or the other. We could either do engagement and outreach around this work, or we could hire an FTE and then cobble together the resources to pay a person over and above the $60,000 worth of resources. Again, let me say I am appreciative that it's recognized that there needs to be new resources directed towards implementation and enforcement of these labor laws. But the either or situation for us will be challenging. The advocates, folks who've worked hard to bring these laws to fruition, recognize the challenge. We recognize the challenge inside the Civil Rights Department as well, because as we have been working on the run-up towards the implementation of the minimum wage ordinance, we are taking complaints on sick and save time. So we've got outreach and engagement work that we're doing, complaints that we're looking at. So right now, if you remember, it's kind of a softer enforcement, but that will need to be looked at differently in 2018 for sick and save time. So I am appreciative of the recognition that there needs to be an injection of resources into this division to make sure that these laws are enforced properly. But I also want to flag this to the council that I think that this should receive some additional discussion. And I will leave it at that.
Can you pause for just a second?
Yes.
Councilmember Glidden?
Thanks. Well, I'm kind of looking ahead a couple slides, but you've kind of already done all the lead up on this. So this is actually a question for Mr. Intermill. What does it mean that there's a position added, but it's unfunded? I don't get that.
So if the department were to find resources to pay for that salary, they would have the the FTE allocated that they could fill.
Okay. Is that something I don't understand? Are you saying that they have to have like a actual allocation of X amount of staff people?
Mr. Chair, Council Vice President.
So you're
yes,
really just
that's
trying to flag that there's a issue for us to solve here.
I
don't know. I'm just saying that because there's one FTE unfunded, and we don't. That's kind of unusual that we see that within the budget. So just trying to understand what's in the budget book.
Yeah. So, Mr. Chair, Council Vice President, I think as Director Corbell stated, my understanding of the intent was that 60,000 could be used for programmatic funding or to help fund that full FTE.
Okay. And what would be the cost of funding a full FTE, just so we're understanding the difference? Because the 60 is ongoing, so that's helpful to know that's ongoing funding.
On average, an FTE in the city is about 100,000.
Right. Would that be the level of position needed for this? I mean, that kind of relates to what's the level, because that includes all your benefits and all those other things that are all the costs. That's not just a strict salary.
Mr. Chair, Council Vice President, we do estimate that with base salary and all the benefits and the other non-labor associated with the position, that it's approximately $100,000. This position would be a professional position that would need to come in with the skills and talents to be able to know how to do investigations, in addition with some communication skills to be able to help with outreach. So this is not an entry-level position by any means. And, respect to Mr. Intermill, he's a very bright guy and a nice guy. But there's not money laying around the Civil Rights Department budget for us to just find. So I just want to put that out there. I think
we understand that.
Yeah,
so we're understanding there's a position here. It is not
Okay.
funded, and either and this is kind of what happens every budget, right? There's a bunch of hard choices with
I
things
get
that
that.
are priorities, and so and it's up to us to kind of figure out, is there a solution that makes sense? I'll just say my part. We passed unanimously this minimum wage, and I personally think we have an obligation to ensure we're properly enforcing it. And it's not just enforcing, it's also providing the support to the business community. I mean, that's a lot of what these staff members do. All right.
Yes.
There's others who want to.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of but I'm sure we'll look at some other comments. So I'll let Councilmember Johnson, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also share those concerns of Council Vice President Glidden. And did I miss the answer to this of why would this not have funding behind it in the proposed budget? To be allocating an FTE without any funding. Where's the money coming from to pay for that?
So again, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, the intent was not to not answer, so I apologize. I think that the intent was to provide flexibility for the department to be able to make choices if they're able. So, having that room to add the FTE if they are able to find the funding. Does that help?
If they're able to find the funding. Okay. Is that a common practice in our budget? I've just never seen it before.
Sure.
And so I would normally have assumed there would be some sort of policies in place that would prevent unfunded FTEs from being added.
So at this point, I may invoke my 5-month card.
That's fair. That's fair. Well,
Unfortunately, Mr. Ruff.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, is it common? No, but do departments on occasion will say to us or at times to the council, hey, we've been outsourcing this money and we think that we can be more efficient as a department by internally moving this contract into a position, but we don't have a position available. So granting an FTE to offset other funding that may exist within the budget is not uncommon. Sometimes that can be done administratively. Sometimes that has to come before the council. And so is this a way that we, as Mr. Intermo said, the intent, I think, of this was to provide opportunities so there wouldn't be a delay in coming back for an FTE approval through this budget process if another solution is found. And I think because this is a new program, it's evolving. And I think we all recognize that in terms of where the resource should come from and where it should go.
And I don't know, Mr. Councilmember, continue if you had another question. I didn't mean to.
I appreciate the answer to that. It just seemed odd to me at just the way that it's presented. And so it's helpful to have some additional context on it. And I just agree with my colleague that this is something we passed a policy and we better put adequate funding behind it in order to enforce it and make sure we're doing our due diligence on it. So.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair statement. I think it's happened in at least one other department hearing this season already, where we add a position without funding. And I think part of it may be that you just want to ramp up and create the position, hire the position, and find out what it's going to be needing. I think it also is going to impact out years, because will that be included in those years as a continuing service level in the 19 and 20 budgets?
Sure. I mean, Mr. Chair, the funding will be the only funding that's available. Mm-hmm. I would also say that I bring to mind in this year's budget for our department, we've proposed in our presentation to you, highlighted the fact that we wanted to start a new recruitment process, and we asked for 2 FTEs and only enough funding for 1 position, under the idea that either we on a bell curve funding or through other vacancies, we could afford that in the first year and then decide whether that program would continue. So it's not just a once in a generation kind of change. This is it's a specific example of another case where we added more FTEs than we added funding in this budget.
Right. And then the other risk is always when we're making these funding choices during a budget process, we could be tying up an appropriation that may not be used fully. So this is not, it's a good finance policy is what you're suggesting, that we may not want to say we're putting in funding for $150,000 for something that won't be needed just by creating the position.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think just by creating a position for the show of the position, no, is not something that we would promote as a regular practice of the finance department. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Council Vice President, you had a question?
Right. Well, I just kind of wanted to end with, I I think there is a need for the position. I mean, we passed another ordinance that will start to be implemented in January, which is when a first increase is scheduled to start taking place, which means that, you know, there's a required companion piece around enforcement, which includes the education and kind of all the things that are part of that. I guess I'll just say thanks to Councilmember Andrew Johnson for his comments. I will hope to, you know, find some support from my colleagues. I think the challenge always is kind of where are you taking the money if you think this is important, and then you know, that. But I certainly hope to have the support of my colleagues to find a way to fund this needed position, and also from the mayor's office to kind of help solve what I think is, you know, one of not the only budget challenge I'm sure that's going to come as people think about kind of what's funded in the budget today and what we want a final budget to look like.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. I'm happy to take any questions if there are remaining questions.
Not seeing any. Thank you very much, Ms. Cormel. And we do need to acknowledge the tremendous work that you've done this past year. It's a continuation of a lot of work that's been done this whole term, but I really appreciate how Civil Rights is coordinated with Human Resources Department, with CPED, and with the NCR. All of these departments are working together to really advance many of the all the initiatives that we're putting forward without complaint, with the need for resources. But you guys are really working as a cohesive team together, and I couldn't be more proud of the accomplishments of the Civil Rights Department in leading this work, not just for the city, but for the state, region, and how we're partnering with agencies across the country to make sure that we're doing what we should be doing for the city of Minneapolis residents. So thank you very much for the work.
Thank you very much. My team.
Well
Thank
done.
you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Well, good. Thank you very much. I think at transition time, I think our next hearing is Youth Coordinating Board. So, Mr. Groot, whenever you're ready, please feel free to begin, and welcome.
How do I bring my program up? No, we sent it. Oh, you have it. Let's see, that's very smart.
Really.
Nobody's watching you,
There
Kelly,
we
don't
go.
worry.
Great.
Good morning,
Good morning, Mr. Groot.
Mr. Chairperson and members of the committees. As you know, I'm Ann DeGroot. I'm the Executive Director of the Minneapolis Youth Coordinating Board. And I want to recognize some people who are here today who work with our youth and with the Youth Coordinating Board. Heidi Pope, who is the Manager of Youth Line from Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, is here with us over there. And Phil Rooney from the Youth Coordinating Board, who manages our after-school network, is here as well. And also, many of you may know Nigel Perot from the Health Department, who is a regular contributor to work at the Youth Coordinating Board. And then I think you all know Judy Pickering,
Everybody.
who is our finance manager. They all work together with us to help make Minneapolis the best city in the United States for children, youth, and their families. And
You're going to have to start the slideshow.
Thank you. There we go. For children, youth, and their families. We have a lot of, as you know, our name is the Youth Coordinating Board, so we work in a coordinative way with many agencies and organizations, not all of whom could be here today, but I do appreciate my colleagues who were able to come. I'd also like to recognize for you something you may not know, which is these 3 young women are from Hamline University, and they're taking a local government class. So they're here observing today. I didn't know if you knew that. I thought you might like to hear that. As you know, the YCB works across a broad spectrum for children and youth and their families. We work from prenatal to age 20. You can see that we have 4 goals that we work with. They range from early childhood to school to after school, and then to making sure that our children have the skills necessary as they move into adulthood in terms of social emotional learning and also in terms of their ability to work in civic government. Our draft budget is before you. We have some copies of it. If you'd like us to hand them out, we'll be happy to do that. Our budget is very much the same budget that we've had for a number of years now. We do have projects that come in and out, but our core budget remains pretty much the same. It is always our goal to be relatively small and to work with our 4 jurisdictions to be able to accomplish our goals as much as possible. We use city general funds, as you can see here, for a number of different purposes. We are able to re-grant some of the money that you make available to us to the Minneapolis Parks, to Minneapolis Community Education, and to the Hennepin County Libraries for use in after-school activities. These funds have always been important, and we've always seen a good return on our investment for them. But we're right now in a situation in the state of Minnesota, which impacts Minneapolis severely, of seeing a significant decrease in funding going to after-school activities and programs. Our research shows that in 2010, in the state of Minnesota, $36 million was available for after-school activities, and in 2017, it had decreased to $4 million. So funds have become less and less available. You should know that I have asked the Minneapolis Youth Coordinating Board to help me think about how do we solve that problem. That's why we were set up. We were set up to solve big problems about children and youth. And we are working on a project right now together to find a way to solve that because reduced funding, lack of funding, is going to result in lack of activities for our children, which will result in their inability to find things to do, and it will hurt their safety. It will harm their ability to graduate from high school. It will take away programs and projects that teach them about the 4th goal you see here, about social emotional learning. So we're significantly concerned about this, and we'll be bringing you more information over time about that. You've also really generously supported the Minneapolis Youth Congress, a group of about 50 young people from all over the city who come together and work with us on civic government issues and have provided tremendous input and support to numerous departments in the city and the county and the parks and the schools about what a youth perspective is. They've also done some work with Metro Transit, by the way, which is a little outside of our group, but really impacts our young people. I want to invite you all to their oath of office on November 2nd. I know it's not great timing, but they're going to be sworn in next Thursday in the atrium of City Hall, 5 o'clock. Please join us. You'll get a little invitation from me as well. And then you've supported our outreach efforts for numerous years and our staff support for youth development work that we do. I wanted to spend a few minutes on a program that we are developing now that the mayor has asked for $40,000 to be used for this project. And I want to talk a little bit about this because it's new and it's in development. And I know there are some questions about this. This first slide tells you really what the Minneapolis Children's Savings Account Program is. It talks about the vision, the values, and the outcomes that we see that could happen because of this. Essentially, it's a program in which an entity, and it could be the city, opens savings accounts for children beginning at either birth or kindergarten or some other significant point in their life. And those accounts, which would be custodial accounts, are held in trust for them until they graduate from high school. And those funds can then be used for their post-secondary work, for college, vocational school, technical school, whatever kind of education that they want to pursue. The money that is put into the custodial account can be added to in incentivizing programs. A good example of that would be Hennepin County, perhaps incentivizing county-involved youth with funding to, a 3-year-old gets screened, they put some money in the program for that 3-year-old. These programs are a very new thing in the country. They're very new. We are on the upswing on this program here in Minneapolis. But so far, they are already finding some excellent results around children's savings accounts. We do recommend that we do them in Minneapolis. We think they can be very useful for our young people in helping to ensure graduation, particularly for communities in which savings and wealth creation just simply don't happen. And so we think this is a good strategy. Our next slide really shows what did we do in 2017. The city allocated $15,000 last year for us to do some work. We did. Essentially, we answered 2 questions. What are they? And specifically, what are they in Minneapolis? And then why? And so you can see what those things are here. And you can see the outcome, which is some vision statement goals and outcomes that we've put together for our own program. But in doing the work in 2017, there were numerous questions that were raised. When we first started this project last January, the consultant we hired had a timeline in which we would be able to launch these in January 2017. Boy, were we wrong. There's a lot more questions and a lot more work that needs to be done to implement this properly. The average amount of time that it takes other cities to implement the Children's Savings Account program is 2 years. So 6 months would have been extraordinary. And I think at this point, given what I know, it would not only have been extraordinary, but I think it would have been dangerous, because I don't think we would have been adequately able to answer all the questions that have come up around Children's Savings Account, and there are numerous of them. So in 2018, what we would do is we would have developed by June, in time for the budget request, by the way, but we want to put this a bit on a fast track. We would have developed a strategy for long-term program sustainability, including public-private partnerships. We will have a proposal for permanent community-based home for the Children's Savings Account program. Let me say something about that. The YCB is a good place to start things, but not necessarily the place to keep them forever. So we need to find a good home for this project. And then we would be able to present a plan for citywide implementation of the program using what we call a franchising model, which would ensure equity and optimal access to families. The franchising model is kind of new. We would be really testing this here, but we think it's a way for individual cultural communities in particular to have a way to buy into this program, hook onto this program, and feel comfortable and confident, and also a way for us to help them do the savings in a way that makes sense for who they are as a community. So we're looking at that. Minneapolis has a children's savings account program at Mdc. Mdc, a nonprofit organization working primarily with Native youth, has had this program for a while. They are seeing great success with it. And part of our idea for franchising came from watching Mdc, because they really work with the Native community. They use a Native bank. They develop relationships with families and with children. So I think it's a really good model for us to pursue and to look at into the future. All of this happens, of course, where we work collaboratively. We are working with everyone from the Federal Reserve Bank all the way to a variety of nonprofits in our community. Councilmember Quincy, in fact, has been on a steering committee, and the Federal Reserve Bank is there. I will say a little note about that, which is that what they found nationally is that when the Federal Reserve Bank gets involved, it goes better. So Boston's Federal Reserve is very involved. Chicago's is not. Chicago's in year 7 of planning. So here we are in Minneapolis. We have a very enthusiastic Federal Reserve, and we in fact hope to have our Midwest Consortium of Children's Savings Accounts programs meeting here in the spring, and we'll be involving the Federal Reserve in that meeting. So that is some of the information about children's savings accounts programs. And I know there are questions. I'd be happy to answer them. But I think I'll just go through with the slideshow, and then I'll stop whenever there's a question. As you also know, the YCB has been involved in coordinating a downtown youth outreach team for the past 5 years. We have had great data with the police department around a decrease in crime of juveniles and of young adults. This is a way to have adults, trained youth workers, come and work with young people downtown to engage them, talk with them, do activities with them. And it's a program that works well enough that the Minneapolis Health Department has now engaged us to do a project with them on the north side of Minneapolis that is funded by the CDC. So it's a program that's working well. We are now going to have the opportunity to develop our program into a model, and the CDC is very excited to take it other places. So Minneapolis is really going to, I think, fare well with this program as well as the children's savings accounts. The only kind of special thing about the outreach team I want to say this year, there are many special things about the outreach team, but one of the special things that happened this year is that the city, through parking services, is allowing us to use the bus shelter on Hennepin and 3rd as kind of a home for like a headquarters, a central place downtown. The kids call it Inner City Hall. So we're going to be there as long as it's there and as long as we don't have anywhere else to go downtown. So, and we're downtown in the summer. We're not there now. Feel free to come in the summertime and say hi. It's a lot of fun. We do dancing and mic nights and exercise and arts and all kinds of things. So it is a good place for our young people to be able to go. One piece about that I do want to say, I got a call from the assistant director of Minneapolis Athletics who said, can I tell parents that if something happens downtown, like there's a concern about violence or a big rally that might just rope a bunch of people in, and my kids are transferring buses, if they're afraid, can they come to you? And I said, yes, we want them to come to us. So there is, it's becoming, we're hearing about reasons to do it that we didn't intend. Okay, so it's, I think, a very good project. Finally, funding from you comes to us for the Minneapolis Youth Congress, 10 years. We're in our 10th year. This year we did a big evaluation with Rainbow Research. And as a result, we're going to even do more. We even have the Youth Congress direct their work more than they have in the past. So we're excited about that. We're excited to swear the young people in next week. They've engaged in a number of programs, some of which you can see. These are just from mostly last year. And we look forward to keeping that valuable resource in Minneapolis going. When I go to other conferences and they talk about youth engagement, no other city has this large a group. No other city stipends them. No other city trains them or feeds them. We have a jewel here in the Youth Congress, and I'm appreciative of the city because most of the funding comes from you. So that's my presentation. Mr. Chairperson, members of the committee, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Not seeing any direct questions, but I sure would like to offer my support of the work that YCB has been doing, especially when we're talking about what's happened in the last 8 years in downtown. And it was YCB who we reached out to when I was working on Nicollet Mall livability, or with the downtown councils and various 2025 goals. They always involved some concerns about youth. And you were always been a willing partner to come to those conversations and really help solve problems. As you suggested, that's really what the YCB does, is help solve problems. And it's in coordination with what's happening at with the downtown ambassadors, what's happening in the buildings, providing active programming space, having youth outreach workers, engaging youth at their level, at their peer relationship rather than within law enforcement. We see an increased need of that, so we're happy to have this partnership that already we can build on. So just wanted to offer, obviously, Councilmember Palmisano is a Minneapolis City Council member representative on the Youth Coordinating Board, as well as Councilmember Gordon, who chairs the YCB. So I'm going to give you a impromptu moment. If you'd like to do a commercial for YCB, Councilmember Gordon.
Well, I've actually served on the Youth Coordinating Board since I was first elected, so I've been there for a long time, and I've seen it grow and mature and become more effective. And I have to say, it's a amazing opportunity just to have the county, the schools, and the parks all together focused on youth and helping decide what the priorities are. And I know that the other jurisdictions greatly value the support that the city gives to that. And I'll just echo what you said. Certainly the outreach workers are very important too. We've done some work in the schools as well that has been helpful. And I just have to say that I think the growth and the assistance of the Youth Congress has been phenomenal. I'm glad to see that it's going to get even more serious and more involvement going into the future. I know that it's actually had a great impact on affecting some of the policy changes at the city. So appreciate all the good work.
Mr. Groot, I wondered if you might be able to offer a comment about the compact, what's going on with the relationship and how we're recommitting ourselves to the work.
Oh, Mr. Chairperson, members of the committee, that's a great question. The Youth Coordinating Board has, in addition to what you saw as our priorities, with each of our jurisdictions, we ask them about every 5 or 6 years to commit to what they're going to do in the next period of time relative to children and youth. And some of it's directly related to the Youth Coordinating Board, but some of it isn't. And so we started this year with the update of the compact by coming to the city because the city has a youth cabinet, so a ready-made group to do this work, who think about this all the time. And so with the assistance of Nigel Perot from the health department and other health department staff, the cabinet really worked on what is going to be the compact going forward. And so we've been, we have finished it. It is, I'd be happy to send it to you. In the meantime, this is a little new piece of information. We are also going to be updating our youth master plan, which really the compact will feed into. And so it was a good opportunity to update what the city is doing. So lots of the things the city does, the youth violence prevention work that the city does, and a commitment on the part of the city to make sure that we have internships for young people and Step Up, and a number of the programs that already happen. So it's a very strong statement, and it's comprehensive. And I think it's also often things that you may not think about, making sure children have a safe place to live, making sure we have opportunities for their parents to have employment, things that the city impacts and is involved with. So you'll be hearing more about that.
Good. Thank you very much, Mr. Groot.
Thank you. Thank you,
We're-
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
We're
Appreciate it.
right on time, so I'm very excited about that, which allows us to move to our next hearing, which is Municipal Building Commission. Mr. Delaney, whenever you're ready, please begin.
Okay, thank you.
Allow as much time as you need for your transition. Sure.
We have our, yes, or is it on already, or, okay. Oh, okay.
Welcome.
Great. Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. My name is Erin Delaney, and I am the director of the Municipal Building Commission. Thank you for the opportunity this morning to talk with you about our 2018 operating budget as approved by the Mdc Board, and I will be talking briefly about the capital projects that the Mdc will be conducting in the building this year, next year. As we all know, this beautiful building is jointly owned by Hennepin County and the city of Minneapolis. And as created by state statute, the MBC manages this building. The Mdc Board is comprised of 4 members, obviously the 2 city members, Mayor Hodges and Council President Johnson, along with Chair Callison and Commissioner McLaughlin. The 4 of those make up the Mdc Board. An interesting fact, there's approximately 350,000 square feet of usable space in the facility, and the city occupies about 200,000 square feet of that, and that is approximately 60% of the building. I'd just like to remind the committee that we do offer and sponsor monthly tours of the building. So we encourage you to share that news with your constituents and members of the public. We also are very much available to provide tours anytime upon request. We really like to take any opportunity we can to showcase the building. And in showcasing the building, we have been working on the City Hall Courthouse Catering and Events program. Hopefully by now you've seen some of the events that have gone on, possibly on the weekends or into the evening. We've had 49 outside events for this year and have accumulated about $65,000 in revenue. This revenue goes directly to a historic preservation fund that is in turn used to fund projects in this building. For example, the HP fund will be covering the entire cost of our current project of reinforcing the bell supports up on the 13th floor of the building. You may not see the bells frequently, but I hope you hear the bells. And the support system is in need of a lot of reinforcement to the tune of $125,000. So this is a good opportunity to showcase that this is what the Historic Preservation Fund is paying for this project. We've also released a catering RFP and are reviewing responses. Staff would like to take this time to review different proposals from different caterers to see if there's ways that we can improve the program and essentially increase the income that is earned through this events program. So then this is our organizational chart. There's 59 employees, administration, all of your custodial and utility workers are MBC workers. All of the building trades employees that you see in the building are MBC workers. And the security staff that you see at the 4th Street entrance, those are all MBC employees. As we move into the 2018 budget overview, you'll see that there is an increase in the request. We are transitioning, the administration is transitioning into our own payroll service and our own benefits program. So increases to those are included in this budget. In addition, you'll note under repairs and improvements, there's a one-time amount of $300,000 that is associated with the owner-occupied space in the basement and the sub-basement. There's extensive mechanical and life safety work occurring in those areas. And because the MBC is the occupant, we are obviously responsible for all owner-occupant improvements. So again, that's a one-time increase for 2018. Additional budget information. For the operating budget, it is split 60% city, 40% county. It comes to a 9% increase over the 2017 adopted budget. The city's portion for the 2018 budget is $5.54 million as shown on the screen, and then the county's portion is $3.79 million.
Ms. Delaney,
Yes.
I've been curious, and I don't know if you're able to give that information, but of the utility budgets, like the cost of electricity itself, how is that assessed between the county and the city? And how are the savings realized with the investments that have been made in the capital projects about converting to LED lighting, et cetera? How is that captured, either just in reduced charges or some sort of rebate? Or how are we doing this?
Chair Quincy, yes. Our utilities are being paid out of the operating budget. So the city would would pay 60% of those. And yes, we have seen a significant decline in both in the usage and the consumption rates have steadily declined through the improvements that we're doing with the mechanical and the life safety projects. In fact, I at one point had a chart that depicts that steady decline, and I'm happy to show you that again. In addition to the decline in consumption, obviously that is a decline in the cost for us. Okay. However, we also have taken advantage of more rebate programs, and your example is right on with the changing in the electrical. We've approximately $2,000 to $3,000 in rebates that we've been able to apply and secure for 2017. So we'll continue down that road with both efficiencies and rebate options.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight the fact, obviously, that it's a shared cost between the county, and we're going to be paying 60% of it because based on the square footage of the building. But the realization of savings is in the out years as we're continuing to drop operational costs.
That is correct.
And you've also noted that it excludes the detention center. How is the energy split? Is that part of the operating expense that's split 60-40, or is that on a separate meter?
Chair Quincy, the Hennepin County pays for all expenses associated with the ADC.
Okay.
So that is, yes, carved out. Those utility charges, all of the water, sewage usage is all charged directly to Hennepin County.
Okay. Thank you.
So just a brief time to talk about the different departments within the MDC. Administration obviously is in room 105 in City Hall. And our main focus this last quarter has been our transition into an independent payroll vendor. And I'm pleased to say that today is our second paycheck with the new vendor, and it's been another success. The first paycheck worked, and now the second one has. And we are in the process of transitioning to an independent benefits package effective 1/1 of 2018. Our custodial and our security staff are truly the heart of our agency. One thing I'd like to point out that since our custodial staff in 2015 implemented a more aggressive recycling campaign, we have increased our diversion rate from 27% to 67%. In addition, with our security staff, we are now going to be moving forward with less contract security and more internal MDC security staff as well. And in our repairs and improvements, again, this is primarily our building trade staff, our painters, plumbers, carpenters. They have done tremendous amount of work, specifically in the basement, in that sub-basement areas, with the mechanical life safety work, and we just really have a great staff. Committee, I want to point that out, that our building trades and our custodial and our security staff, we have very long-term retention in our staff. They love the building and they do work very hard to take care of it. Again, the Adult Detention Center and all costs associated with the ADC are paid by Hennepin County exclusively. The work for others category is work that's outside the regular maintenance that the MDC provides. And in this category, individual departments pay separately for this work. And just like to highlight some of our capital projects that the MDC will be managing ongoing and moving forward. The capital budget is split 50-50 with Hennepin County. The first two projects are the mechanical and the life safety. I've referred to this a couple times. This is what we're working on in the basement and the sub-basement area. One piece to this project I know we've talked about before, but that does include that in this work, we will be adding bike locker and changing facilities for folks who use their bicycles. The exterior improvements project listed as number 3, please note that that does include two pieces that we've been interested in for several years, and that is exterior lighting of the 4th and 5th Street towers. And in addition, the removal of antennas on the roof of the building. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to see the number of antennas that are no longer in use, but they're all over the top of our building. And in fact, one of them is even attached to the flagpole. So we're eager to get those antennas removed from the building. And then, of course, elevator modernization, project number 4, we will be focusing on the 4 rotunda elevators and the 2 elevators at the 5th Street entrance as well. So this is our capital budget for 2018, the $5.6 million. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the building or any of the capital projects.
Thank you very much, Ms. Delaney.
Okay.
Not seeing any.
Thank you for
for
your time.
work.
Okay, thank you.
Not only a functioning office, but a pretty historic building. So thank you for your work.
Yes.
Be able to, I think we're going to slide right into our next hearing, which will be from debt and our capital budget. So we're just waiting for that transition. We threw a pretty big curveball at Mr. Ablin here. Asked him to go about 3 hours earlier than he had planned. So.
Why is this so hard?
You're killing me, Smalls. Do you have it, Mike? All right. Well, I was trying to be helpful.
We have to put it in the back, or? All right, it's not showing up on this thing. Let's see my presentation. Is it in the right thing? Yeah, but I don't see my presentation. Which I saved in a hurry. I thought it was going to be down here. Can I log into this computer? Yeah. It's not showing up on my thumb drive. not showing up.
Oh, there it is.
I'm in there, but it's not on the disk.
Oh, close it. Do it again. Apologies. Okay.
Council members, you have it from your Diaz, right? The presentation? There we go. All right.
Welcome, Mr. Abland. I just do want to point out, I realize we've thrown a lot at you changing the schedule. And I know you had a long presentation ready, but if you could, anything you could do to abbreviate it would be helpful, at least covering highlights before you get into some details, because council members do have some additional items on their calendar. So please begin.
Well,
Thank
good
you.
morning, everybody. I'm Michael Ablin. I'm the Director of Investments, Capital, and Debt Management for the city. And we are going to go through the capital budget and the debt service budget. And I will try and go as quickly through it as I can. Before we get started, you're going to hear the term net debt bonds and bond redemption levy. That is the primary property tax supported tax levy that pays for the bonds that are a funding source in a lot of what we're going to talk about today. So what is in the 5-year capital plan is $935.6 million. You can see it's primarily public works with about 88% of the budget. In the 5-year plan, Park Board has $63 million. This includes everything in the 20-year neighborhood parks plan now. All the funding that was part of that agreement is included. About $10 million for Mdc, which includes both the city and county share of those. And then public grounds and facilities is the other larger area, and there's a slide later that'll show the building projects that are part of that. So in terms of revenue sources for the 5-year plan, about 27% of the 5-year plan is net debt bonds. So this is one of the categories that has gone up as a result of the 20-year Parks and Streets plan. We used to be programming about $155 million of this revenue source. We are now at about $251 million. So that is one of the key components of the 20-year plan. It's always been part of the 5-year plan for a lot of different things, but now it's grown with the 20-year commitment. The other big sources in there are enterprise bonds and enterprise revenues. So Of the 935 million, I believe about 330 million of that is related to enterprise fund capital, so solid stormwater, sanitary sewers, and water are the big components. There is a parking funded project in there this time, and there is also some solid waste funding in the 5-year plan. In terms of 2018, this is the slide that breaks out just the calendar year that will be part of the budget discussion for budget adoption for 2018. A little over $200 million in total. Again, largely public works, about 85%. Park board, about 12.3 million. And for the 5-year, or for the 2018 plan, we've got net debt bonds of about 23% of our budget for the calendar 2018. Enterprise revenues 14, enterprise bonds about 22%. And assessments you can see is 13%. A big factor that grows as part of the streets infrastructure plan is, as we're doing a lot of these roadways in the residential streets, there's a portion that's assessed. So the assessment funding has also helped to bolster the total funding required for the paving projects that are being expanded. Okay, in terms of net debt bonds for calendar 2018, we've got just a little under $48 million of net debt bond funding. You can again see the 10.5 for the park board. That was the 8 million that is the expanded, and sort of the 2.5 million that had been sort of the previous base for park board projects, and a little over 30 million for public works. So they're the big pieces. We have some smaller pieces for the building commission and some public buildings. And throughout this presentation, whenever you see miscellaneous projects, the only project that's in that category anymore is arts and public places. And you'll see later on that that's a 1.5% of the net debt bond budget. So that number has been made sort of formulaic as a result of the ordinance, and it's being honored in what I'm presenting today. In terms of non-property tax supported in 2018, some of the bigger pieces are the water fund. Again, those special assessments are a big portion of 2018. The sidewalk program is assessed, as well as the paving projects that are a big part of what's growing in the plan. Sanitary sewer fund has some good-sized projects going on, as does stormwater. Okay. Questions? I'll move on. So this is the 20-year streets, infrastructure, and neighborhood parks plan. Sometimes it's called neighborhood parks and street infrastructure. On different documents, it's described that way. But basically, it adds about $30 million a year to total funding that had been in place previous to this plan being enacted. So you can see the park board amounts are $8 million a year. And then out in 2022, that is the first sort of year where inflation starts to kick in on their contributions. So that's a 2% growth in their net debt bond programming out in 2022. And then the street infrastructure program is the public works piece. And you can see their allocations are also growing over time in this program. So about $152 million has been added to what had previously been the base for streets and neighborhood parks.
Okay. Mr. Ablin, I think there's a couple things I wanted to point out here. You're talking about the dollars, of course. That's what you do. But these were added to what we were already doing. Is that what you're saying?
Mr. Chair, that is correct.
And then what's the role of CLIC in determining the amounts that are going into those, or are they just focused on which projects? When we start with the CLIC process each year, do we say, here's the target dollars you have to work with, or do we give them a list and that's what they come up with and that drives the dollars? Which is it?
Mr. Chair, it's a little of both. This piece that is about the neighborhood parks plan is a portion of the bigger capital budget. CLIC starts with all the proposals from all of the departments, and it's the full range of things that departments want to do in the 5-year plan. If they had all the money in the world, that's what they have requested essentially and what they can physically accomplish. CLIC starts with that, but then we prescribe for them a range of resources for like net debt bonds as one of their primary sources that they need to help us whittle down to the number that we have for them to work with and what we have the mayor and city council to work with. So they prioritize out of that larger list that it's been submitted by departments, a balanced plan that uses the recommendation of the net debt bond source. And then they also weigh in on the enterprise funds to the extent that there's a large contingent of projects in the enterprise funds that they are in agreement of the necessity and the size and the amount of budget that is going for enterprise capital, which again, like I mentioned earlier, is about a third of the capital program. So that's their role, is to start with the whole amount that's been submitted and narrow it to certain resources within net debt bonds and what they also recommend in the other enterprise fund areas as well. In terms of the funding for the Streets and Neighborhood Parks Plan, you can see that net debt bonds is the largest component. At this point, we're programming all the net debt bonds to fill the park contingent. And then you can see the rest of that is the street projects, and they are receiving a growing share of net debt bonds over time. They also have a stormwater revenue piece that's helping to do storm sewer work that's part of paving projects, as well as general fund dollars and some, during the first 5 years of this plan especially, there's some cash balances that have been incorporated to jumpstart this 20-year program. And you can see that they tend to wane after 2020 other than the general fund. So the general fund amount is going to go up, and that's capacity that's being made available through decertification of the consolidated TIF district. So that's why the general fund is picking up an additional share as we get into the later years of this program. Okay. At this point, then, I'm going to go through just what's in the 5-year plan in the mayor's recommendation, and then both in 18 and what's in the 5-year plan. So you can see Mdc has some life safety projects, some mechanical projects in the 5-year plan, as well as exterior building improvements. These are all improvements here at City Hall, and then some elevator projects. So about $5 million in 2018 and $10 million over the 5-year plan. And these are matched 50-50 basically with the county. Park Board has several programs that they've submitted. Highlighted in green for you is where basically the dollars from the neighborhood parks expanded plan go. They go into capital infrastructure and rehabilitation, which is major rehabilitation within neighborhood parks. So about $12 million in 18, 63 in the 5-year plan. Okay. Public Works, I'm not going to try and explain all the projects that are in the Public Works plan, but what I do is try and grab the 10 largest categories of projects that show about $314 million of their $823 million that's in the 5-year plan. So again, that 823 is 823 of the 935 in total. So again, they have the lion's share of the projects. And their big projects tend to be in the enterprise fund areas. You can see water distribution improvements is the big one. There's a big Fridley filter plant rehabilitation going on. It's like second or third year, and it's going to go on for a couple more years. In total, that project's in the 60 million plus range. So you can see the big dollars are still going through for that project. And then sanitary tunnel and storm rehab, and then down below storm drains and tunnel rehab. So the tunnel projects are very expensive from the enterprise fund. So those projects tend to make it in the top 10 for Public Works. And then the other one is asphalt pavement resurfacing. So that's where we're seeing a large amount of dollars within a program. Now, there are lots of individual street projects that I'm not covering here that are, some of which are very large, that are part of the 20-year plan. But this just shows one program. This is the one that repairs neighborhood streets, and assessments are associated with that. So that's sort of one of the big paving programs, but it's by no means meant to show everything that's going on in paving.
Mr. Abelin, at the risk of lengthening, I just had a quick question. It's more for the audience so they understand what an enterprise fund is. An enterprise fund is the sources that we collect from revenue for charging people for like water and solid waste and recycling. And what Mr. Abelin is saying is when we issue bonds, how do we pay for that debt service? And so it's not on property tax dollars that would pay for that debt service. It would actually be coming out of what we call the enterprise funds to pay for the debt. Fair assessment? Quick.
Mr. Chair, that is absolutely correct.
We start throwing a lot of technical terms.
Correct.
Since you're here, I thought I'd mention it to you.
Great. The other big project, you can see Nicollet Avenue over Minnehaha Creek. That is a very big bridge project. So sometimes a project will get in that's a large bridge into the top 10. And then concrete streets rehabilitation would be another program that is part of the 20-year plan. This program is ramping up to do some major repairs to concrete streets within the city, and there's assessment component associated with those as well. Okay. Public grounds and facilities. This category is related to building projects here in the city that various business functions use, like public works and police and fire and reg services, etc. So in the program for 2018, there's about $10.5 million and about $35 million in the 5-year plan for a variety of facilities. A couple of the big ones are, we have a couple fire stations that are in the planning and construction phases soon. Fire Station 1 is one of the big ones, and then also Fire Station 11. Okay. And then there's the Art and Public Places budget, and like I had mentioned earlier, a full 1.5% of the net debt bond component is incorporated into public art for projects. All right, that's about all I have on the capital side. If there's no questions, I'll go on to the debt side. So debt, one of the components of debt is the bond redemption levy. This is how we pay for the net debt bond component. So I had mentioned that we have about $250 million or $251 million of net debt bonds in the 5-year plan. So you can see the levies are going up from 38 to 39. They're rising now. That's in response to the fact that we are, in fact, programming more dollars for departments to spend. So right now, the programming is coming in actually higher than the bond redemption levy, and that is because we spread the cost of debt service over time. So as these revenues ramp up, they will get to and surpass how much we put into new spending, and that's when we'll catch up and start to actually reduce the debt over time. Right now, we're into a period of time where we're actually going to be growing the total amount of property tax debts outstanding as we ramp up this program, and then the levies will catch up over time and then overcome that. The plan is to pay off all of the debt associated with the 20-year plan before we get to the end of the 20 years. So you can see that this ramp of the bond redemption levy will continue, and eventually it will pay off some of that debt. As property tax supported debt, this is a historical view, about 10 years of the debt that makes up property tax supported. So the net debt bonds are certainly incorporated in here. Also incorporated in here is the library referendum. So back in 2008 was the final year of issuing debt for the library program. So we're in pay down mode on that, and you can see what that's having an impact on in terms of dollars of outstanding debt per person in the city of Minneapolis. In 16 and 17, you can see we're starting to level off on that, but we may actually see that go up slightly in the future as we're ramping up this program. It won't be like appreciable. It won't go back up to like what you see in 2008 or 9, but it may start to slightly ramp with outstanding debt for a period of time before it becomes fully funded again. In terms of 2017 bond sales, we sold 2 series of bonds in May of this year. One of them was a combination of refunding of $17 million for the Nicollet Mall variable rate debt. So for the Nicollet Mall and for the Target Center renovation projects, we issued variable rate debt to basically cash flow construction of these major projects. As it turns out, interest rates were exceedingly low, and they continue to be pretty low for variable rate debt. So it was a cost-effective way to finance the cash flow needs, but rates are starting to rise a little bit. So in May, we fixed $17 million of the $25 million Nicollet Mall loan. Actually, we fixed everything that we had drawn at that point in time, and we also fixed everything that we had drawn on the Target Center. So those projects are continuing. They're just about at their conclusions. And we will continue to determine whether or not to put that in variable rate or to do fixed rate debt for the balance of that. We haven't determined that quite yet. We're also in the process of selling $60 million of bonds in November. These bonds will be for this capital program that I'm talking about. 21 million of that is for the enterprise fund capital, and about 39 million for net debt bond projects. So that sale is coming up in November. We've met with the rating agencies. We're waiting for the release of their ratings, and we hope and pray that they'll continue to be AAA, and we do believe they will. Okay. Debt capacity. This whole property tax supported debt is defined to be a maximum, a legal debt margin of 3 1/3% of the market value of city taxable property. For 2016, that would say that we could have up to $1.35 billion of this type of debt. We have 113 million of that type of debt, so we're way below our debt capacity. But debt capacity is a little bit of a tricky term because really, willingness to tax and pay debt service on that is maybe a little bit different from your perspectives than just our capacity to issue debt. So we have historically here been way below our debt capacity. But sometimes people want to say, well, how much debt could we issue? Well, this is what we could issue as tax supported debt based on the property values of taxable property in the city. Our outstanding debt has been going down over time. We are in payoff mode on a lot of major projects, such as the convention center. Tax increment financing debt is in sort of pay down mode. And even our enterprise funds have come down from where they were back in 2004. So the general obligation portion of this is the most relevant to us. That's the debt that we are as a city responsible to pay. And you can see the 64, 65, and 66 there. That's 640 million, 650 million, 670 million outstanding. Like I said, that amount may actually rise slightly with the capital programs that we are undertaking. And we also include our enterprise debt in the general obligation category. Some municipalities would issue revenue bonds in this case. We issue revenue bonds, but we put the GO pledge on them, and that keeps our interest rate actually lower than otherwise. So that debt is included in this slide. And the non-general obligation bonds are related to our common bond fund programs and some tax increment revenue bonds that are outstanding currently. In terms of peak debt, the note actually says down in 2004 we had a $1,299,000,000 of debt. That included $118 million of pension bonds. Those pension bonds are totally defeased as of 2012, so we have no pension debt. So this comparison just shows without the pension debt, we had $1.18 billion compared to today's $667 million. So during that time frame, we've paid off about $513 million of debt. So that's a very good positive for the city, because by paying that off, that gives us the capacity to now continue to make improvements to our city's infrastructure and have a more robust ongoing capital program. So you can tell where the debt is here. You can see the big categories are enterprise funds. Again, that's where there's heavy investment. That's where we have debt outstanding. Tends to be a little bit longer term than our net debt bonds because those assets are very long term in nature. So convention center, you can see the convention center's debt back in 2004 was $244 million. At the end of this year, it'll be at $73 million. And that is totally paid off in the next 3 years. So 18, 19, and 20, we'll be paying that full $73 million off. So that's helping to keep that total general obligation debt number down. And then Target Center is new this year. That's the renovation project that is funded with sales tax dollars. So that will, there is still expenditures being incurred. The city's commitment on that is $74 million. And we will reach that commitment here in the next month or two. I'm not going to go through every category of debt here, but that's the picture. In terms of the debt service on that debt, this is the budget for 2018. So the city will be paying off $128.5 million of bonds in calendar 2018 and about $20 million of interest. So a total budget of a little bit under $149 million. And if you look at that number, you say, well, if we're paying off $128 million and we only have $667, aren't we going to really drop? Well, yes and no. This debt will drop off, but we're always adding debt back on. So the numbers do fluctuate. They've, on average, been going down for us in the last 6 to 8 years. But we're now going into a period of fairly significant capital expenditure and robust development. So these numbers may actually grow. And this debt service budget will go down, though, in the sense that convention center will go away. So that $26 million of debt service there, starting in 2021, that number won't be there. So we'll see probably our debt service budgets go down, but our outstanding debt might actually be going up in certain categories anyway.
So could I
Go ahead, Councilmember Gordon.
and I don't want to start some big discussion, especially between John and I, because we have a difference on this topic. But I'm trying to figure out if this is where we're going to see the U.S. Bank Stadium debt appear in a couple of years, and as the convention center debt is gone, and then Target Center also refers to our sales tax portion. So we'll see this coming on. We'll see that coming online in your reports starting in 2021 or 22.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, we will see the convention center drop off, but we won't see the debt associated with the U.S. Bank Plaza coming onto this because those are state bonds, and the commitment for our city to help assist with that debt service is going to come as a reduction in our sales tax revenues that the state sends us. So we won't see that debt on our books, and we won't have debt service associated with that debt. That's going to flow through our budgetary processes. It'll flow through our budgetary processes as a commitment on our downtown assets fund, which, Mike, have you talked to them at all about downtown assets fund yet?
No, we haven't had that yet.
Okay, so it will be a commitment of city resources that are being collected for sales tax, but the state will be subtracting that from what they send us for sales tax revenues.
So that's going to be even trickier for us to even have an accounting of and for the public to be aware of. It sounds like, I think it would be more honest with ourselves if we treated it as a debt that we're giving to the city out of our sales taxes, similar to the Target Center. So I hope, and I believe we've set up a system where we're going to get regular reports on this, but I'm glad to have that clarified for myself.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, we will be seeing that activity flow through our books. It just won't be debt outstanding on our books. But the revenues from sales tax and the commitment to that the city pays will be reflected through our budget process. Mark, you want to speak to that?
Mr. Ruff?
Sure, Mr. Chair. Councilmember Gordon, just one clarification. You asked about the Target Center renovation debt. So that money is in the 2018 budget. That is not waiting until 2021. So,
Correct.
Right. So that, just to clarify, there's a distinction between those two. And just to highlight in terms of Mike's comments about the U.S. Bank Stadium obligations, in terms of the looking at our financial statements, it'll be likely a footnote in our financial statements. It won't actually be showing revenues coming in and coming out, because the state, and that's dictated by state legislation, that's not dictated by any financial policy of the city. The state in the enabling legislation just said, we're going to keep the money. It's not going to go to you, the city. And so we really can't have that flow through books. We have made a commitment to you as regular reporting of MSFA financial operations to come back to the council as often as you want us to give you an update on how that money is being utilized at MSFA.
It sounds like it's going to appear more as a reduction in revenues that we might have expected.
That is correct, and it will be, pursuant to very specific formulas in the legislation that anybody can view as to what those are, and those regular reports, just as we gave you recently, will outline the components of that reduction in revenue.
Thank you.
And just for the Target Center sales tax portion of the debt, the 5.7 here is, the 5.7 million is the debt service on that project, and that debt will be on the city's books, and we will see all activity associated with the renovation project. Okay. Any other questions on this? I'm getting very close to the end. In terms of the debt service budget, this is the percentages of debt that are paid by the various functions of the city. So again, you can see the enterprise funds have a big commitment to debt service for the city's total. They're 20%. Net debt bonds are 26%. And the convention center is the other big piece with 17%. Now, of course, that's going to go away in a couple of years. But the net debt bond portion will remain high because we have a methodology here that keeps that debt relatively short. So we're issuing it and taking it off the books and through that bond redemption levy that I talked about earlier. Okay. And there you can see the Target Center sales tax funded portion of the debt service for 2018. Internal service funds is going, that's actually should say 0.7%, I believe. That debt is going to be defeased in 2018, and that will be the end of our internal service fund debt. So we had deficits in the internal service fund that were balance sheet related and debt related. Now the debt related piece is going to go away in 2018. So our internal service funds are really in pretty good shape now. Okay, and then this one here just shows the budgeted interest expense over the years. So we've been going down in 15, 16, and 17 in expense. Part of that is related to the favorable interest rate environment we've been in. But it's also related to the mix of variable rate debt versus fixed rate debt. And then in 2018, we're actually going up in that percent of interest expense rate. And that's because we do have a little bit more of a mix of taxable debt in our portfolio now versus tax exempt. And we also have less variable rate debt in our portfolio in 18. So those numbers are just sort of interesting to see sort of what's been happening and kind of what the rate is for the city's financing. Variable rate debt, we have 77.63 million estimated at the end of this year. That's related largely to the Target Center renovation project and parking ramps. We've used variable rate debt effectively on parking ramps to help keep that interest expense as low as possible, especially during the tough years when the city's, well, not just the city's, everybody's economic activity was down. Interest rates were very low, and in variable rate mode, we were able to still have positive cash flows out of our parking fund due to the low rates that we were experiencing. And that still continues. Variable rate is still fairly affordable for the city. You can see the rates there are about 1.2% on our tax exempt debt and 1.45 on our variable rate, on our taxable debt for the Target Center. Last year when I did this presentation, those rates were significantly lower. The Fed has been raising the short-term rates, and that is what impacts the rates on these variable rate notes. And that's about all I have. Unless there are other questions or...
Not seeing any. Thank you so much, Mr. Ablin. Obviously, it demonstrates the great financial footing that the city of Minneapolis enjoys, allowing us to make investments in critical areas across the city for the ongoing operations and renovations that are needed in so many of our projects, which we wouldn't have that opportunity, especially to borrow at the interest rates without the management of our programs to ensure the lowest rates possible by having a AAA rating. So thank you so much for all the work you do.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. That concludes the budget hearing for debt and capital overview for the 5-year outlook. And that concludes our morning's presentations for today. The remaining budget topics for the hearings will be at the Park Board, as well as Meet Minneapolis Convention Center. And those will be held over for the overflow time on November 16th. So we'll look forward to those presentations as we wrap up that program. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're adjourned.